Hi guys, it's Leslie. Today we're gonna do dry brush. You ready for the dry brush? Dry brush! Okay, so this is my line drawing. Download it on the website. Well, download it in the membership area where the free watercolors are. Graphite on the back, graphite stick. Where's my graphite stick? Graphite stick on the back. Transfer with the pen, just a ballpoint pen. Christine, who has been doing the lessons, or at least did the flat wash lesson, was like, wow, blew my mind with the transfer. And I was like, I know, I felt the same way when I first saw that done. I have a light box, and I do use a light box when I have single sheets of watercolor paper, but when you've got a block, the graphite transfer works super. So the first thing I'm gonna do is this is actually wood and rocks. Okay, when you transfer this, please only draw the 3 biggest sizes of rocks. These rocks, and those rocks. Do not try the little pebbles. I did, and it's just stupid. Plus, you may want a little bit of play. Depending on how your colors go on, you may want to be able to play with the pebbles a bit. So all of this is going to get outlined in black marker anyway, and so we'll be good to go. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I want to mix up kind of a warmish, kind of ochre tone. So I'm going to use raw sienna, which is right here. Raw sienna is non-staining. Don't believe it's sediments. So I'm gonna wash raw sienna over this entire thing. And then I'm going to throw in a bit of color. I'm going to use the wet and wet technique, and I'm going to throw in a bit of color, pebble it around the rocks, okay? I'm going to go in here later with another glaze, but this is like a first glaze pass. Okay, so I'm going to cover. You can use a spray bottle. Gets a lot more water out there at once. Okay. Nice thing about a spray bottle too is it adds its own little texture. We can get into that later. Okay, so I'm gonna throw in some raw sienna in a very random pattern. Okay, I'm adding more water to my brush, and I'm spreading this out. Just warming up the whole paper and creating some visual interest. Okay, because watercolors are transparent, this layer will show through everything that we do on top of it. Okay, so all of this, these little gradations and little kind of textural interests will remain. Now, I don't want to get this too dark. This will dry lighter, but this is just a first pass, so I don't want to get super dark yet. Right? Don't blow it all in the first pass. Okay, here's a mix that I want to throw in. Actually, I won't do the mix yet. I'm going to go in with some burnt sienna now. Okay? This is reddy brown, very transparent, orangey brown. Okay, and I'm just gonna throw this in a little bit in a few areas. Kind of irony around the screw. Okay, and I just took some plain water, and I'm just encouraging this to move around a bit. Okay, so this is the opposite of dry brush, but dry brush on its own kind of just is like bleh. Like bad. Just, you need to use it in conjunction with other techniques. Okay, I'm dampening off my brush because I want to lift some of this harshness. Okay. Good. Now I need to let this dry. I need to let it dry completely before I do anything else, or it'll be a nightmare. So I'll see you guys in a bit. Hey guys, I'm back. So I blow dried the first base that I had down, and on a lark I put my Kleenex, my toilet paper actually, I blobbed out some areas just to create even more texture. So you can do that. Sorry I didn't do it on camera, but it was like one of those spur of the moment things. So I just did it. You can see it around here. Just to create more texture, more contrast. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I wanna do another kind of wash, wet and wet glaze over top of the rocks. And I want to start with two bases, two neutral bases basically. The first one I'm going to show you is burnt sienna and ultramarine blue together, which to me make, I don't know, it's just a beautiful kind of natural landscape base for both rocks and trees. Depending on how you mix the blue and the brown together, you get a base that's either like greeny gray or browny gray, depending. Let me just get a sheet of test paper. So this is probably a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit green, which means it has too much ultramarine in it. But it sediments, and like it's just a beautiful, beautiful neutral color. It does wonderful bark, does wonderful base. See, now it's too brown. The wonderful world of mixing. It's too blue, too brown, too blue, too brown. Oh, see, that's getting closer. It's a little too brown still. There we go. Now this is just, oh, it's really very similar. It's just like, it's a beautiful base to start for rocks, because it'll sediment, it'll dry unevenly on the page and become pebbled and mottled like rock. So that's one of the bases that I want to put down. The other one is Viridian. Where's my Viridian? It's up here. Okay, so Viridian and Dioxazine Purple. And it gives you kind of a smoky blue. Oh, too purple. Okay, well that's pretty neutral. Look how this is changing though. Can you see how it's, I love it. Okay, so that's like a neutral blue. It's a smoky kind of a blue-gray. And you can see though that the Viridian and the purple are starting to separate out, and it mineralizes a bit. So that's why I'm using these two mixes. I'm gonna mix a little bit more of the Viridian and the dioxazine purple, dioxazine violet, because like I said, what I have said before is always mix up more than you think you're gonna use, just because you really don't want to stop in the middle and have to replicate the color or try and mix up more. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm happy-ish with that. So I'm gonna wash off my brush, and I'm going to just add water in this area. I'm doing it fairly roughly because I don't want this to go down super even. I want it to go down rough. Whoops. That's okay if you overshoot. Take some paper towel or toilet paper or Kleenex or whatever you've got, and with a damp brush, wet it, and then press it dry. Okay, so don't rub, press. Okay. Wow, I so didn't need as much as I painted on there. I totally didn't need as much paint as I mixed, rather. Now, that's pretty bald. It's bald right in there, so I'm gonna throw some more in there. I want to create texture. Okay, so I'm dabbing in, and this is creating like a foundation for the rocks to start taking form. So they're going to be mottled and different colors, and we're going to go in and basically paint each one individually, but not completely. We're getting a lot of the work done by doing it this way. Okay, now I can go in with my individual colors as well if I want to, because I don't really want to do another glaze over this, so I'm gonna throw in some random pebbly colors that are based on the colors that I've already used. So it's burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. Okay. And then I'm putting in more of the mix here. Now I'm going to use straight Viridian. Okay, and we don't want it homogeneous, right? Like, you don't want it to be like a perfect blend and all homogeneous. We want texture. I'm gonna take it easy on the purple because it's unlikely that the purple will show up with any great intensity in my rock faces. We definitely want that a little more neutralized. That's nice. Okay, now if you put water on your brush and you just drop it in, you'll encourage the pigments to move around and greet their neighbors. Okay, so if you wanted to discourage a little a little gathering somewhere that wasn't working out for you, just drop in some water on your brush. Okay. Now I'm working on a little bit of a tip. Okay, so a lot of this is it's gonna run down here. And so I'm gonna dab my brush like this, and I'm just gonna gently pick up some of the excess. And that's to prevent a puddle. It's also to prevent it from drying and kind of back spreading, whatever. I'm just gonna give this a whirl. I'm gonna this is all just kind of play right now, but I don't want to overplay it. So I'm dabbing in, picking up, and then I'm just gonna squirt on here, whoops, which is gonna create, every drop of water moves the pigments apart, so it's just another level of texture. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. I'm a big fan of spray bottles. This also, you don't want to get too crazy, because if you're too much water, it'll spill over. Okay, now I'm gonna leave this. This is my rock base, my rock basin, and I want this to completely dry before we do anything further with the rocks. Okay, and I want this to dry naturally. Hair dryers are super and they can really help you out, but they do impact the way pigments dry because it's an unnatural drying state, and you don't get the same results that you do if you have the time to allow it to dry naturally, because the forms are more natural, the water will continue to move and spread slowly and will evaporate, and it's just a more natural organic process. But whatever you have time for, right? Right. So, okay, I'll be back in a minute. Thanks. Okay, so I'm a little impatient. I don't know if you can see this here. When masking fluid dries, it goes completely transparent like this. This still has a little bit of a white middle to it, which means it's not dry all the way through, but I'm impatient and I want to paint, so I'm just gonna go ahead. Okay, so I've mixed up my warm wood color, which is ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. Okay, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna brush, dry brush, just gonna brush up and down and basically just apply areas of color. I'm not keeping the dry brush look. I'm trying to tone and get a base for the wood. So I'm actually blending this out with just a wet brush. Okay. Okay, that part dried before I was finished, and I don't care. Looks kind of good. Plus, I don't like painting sideways like that. I like doing wood up and down, vertically. Then I try again on this side. You gotta be careful. I opened up my masking fluid here. I wasn't careful and I scrubbed it off. Okay, so once again, I just brushed on the color and brushed on until my brush became dry. And where it's drying, it's leaving that dry brush wood color, or wood texture rather, which works out fine for us. Hi guys, welcome back. Ta-da! Yeah, guess what happened? So Leslie painted for an hour and forgot to press record. So what do you mean you wanted to learn how to paint wood and texture? That's not what this is about. Actually, it totally is. So before I move on, ta-dam! I will give you texture, wood texture, and what I've done for the rock so far. Okay? So my apologies. Let me always be reminded to look for the red button in the future. Okay, so now to begin with, I've got a number 10 round sable, which holds a lot of water. And I'm just going to create broad strokes. Okay, throughout here. Okay, now because this paper isn't wet yet, I'm getting some nice dry brush effects. Now I want to work a little bit quickly because some of these are going to dry before I can get to them. And some of them drying is good, but I do want to blend some of them out. So I'm working quickly. Okay, but look at that dry brush. Because the paper was still dry, it really soaked up. The paper was thirsty and it soaked up all the paint from my brush really, really quickly. And it gave me this great texture. Okay, look at that. That's great barn texture. Now I got a little overzealous and I blended those out. Well, you can see this later, but on here I left a lot more of it noticeable. I wasn't quite as scared as I was with this big area that I immediately wet out and got rid of most of the dry brush texture. But that's okay, it totally doesn't matter because dry brush will continue to use again and again in this effect. Now, I want this totally dry before I paint any more layers on it. So I'm going to use my handy dandy hair dryer and we'll just speed this up. Okay, so that's dry to the touch. Just so you know, I'm patting with the back of my hand because there's less oils on the top of your hand than there is on your fingertips. Okay, so you pat on the top, you're less likely to put oily fingerprints on your paper. You can also test whether the paper is still cool, because if it's still cool to the touch, it means it's still damp. If it feels room temperature, it's dry. This is actually a little bit cool, so it's still a little bit damp, but it's totally dry enough for us to continue. Okay, so using my number 10, I'm going to fill it up. And what I'm going to do is start creating very loose wood texture. Okay, I'm making wood grain. Okay, this is very imprecise. I'm holding my brush upright, kind of like Chinese writing. Okay, and I don't want to create a bunch of carbon copy lines. I want them to migrate in and out, and then pressing, whoops, I totally lost pigment. You press down, your brush widens and will create a knot formation. That's kind of what happens here. Okay, and I will do this with my lines until my brush gives out and I start to create more beautiful textural lines. That's dry brush right there. It's the beautiful dry brush work that when you allow it to come into your painting can add a very painterly, uncontrolled, natural, organic texture. It's beautiful for, well, it's perfect for wood grain, as I show you, as you can see. What's a great idea before you do the wood grain is to take a look at maybe a door or piece of furniture or some bark outside or whatever that you have handy that will show you kind of wood grain in life. And so you can get an idea for the flow of how wood grain, how knots are formed, and how it kind of arranges itself. Okay, so that's our first pass of wood grain. Okay, I'm going to come back in. I'm going to mix up more and I'm going to come back in and I'm going to go over this again. I'm going to turn it sideways this time. I'm going to give that a whirl. Give my arm a rest because I was holding it up. Plus, I'm going to use a smaller brush to get a little more control. Okay? First, I want to mix up some more paint. Okay, I'm going to use a number 6 round, sable round. Okay. What I'm going to do actually is to create a rest for my wrist. So I'm putting my hand here in a fist and I'm going to rest my forearm on it. And that way I have more stability as I go across, but I'm not hindering my ability to use the flexibility of the brush. Okay, it doesn't go all the way. I'm gonna have to not use it over here, but that's okay. Actually, this feels good. Hopefully I'll be able to reach the whole thing with this. Not all of your strokes need to go from one side to the other. Some of them can come up and just disappear or run into another line. Okay, here I definitely want to increase that a little bit more. Holding your brush this way gives you great control over your ability to allow the brush to be flexible. This comes with practice, obviously. And don't worry if you feel a little heavy-handed right in the beginning. You will. It takes practice to have brush control. So stick with it.